Okay, welcome everyone. And this evening, we're going to talk about the various industries as defined by Paul Hawken in the Regeneration book. And Betsy has agreed to facilitate our discussion. So Betsy?
Yes, thank you, Chuck. First, for me, it was interesting just to even hear what his definition for industry is, and he defines that in the very first paragraph, with every industry is a system, and every industrial system is extractive. And so I just found that so powerful. And I also found it intriguing. He lists out, and then there's, maybe 2 to 3 pages on each of the industries that he lists out. Big food, which for me personally was not kind of a surprise. In fact, some of previous chapters in agriculture seems like, there's kind of an overlap there. Then healthcare, banking. I was glad to see that he labels war industry. I would have never thought of that as an industry. And it's also interesting to me that he used the term war industry versus military industry. I don't, it definitely kind of sharpens the concept, at least for me. And then politics. I'm not sure that I would have thought to put politics as an industry. And again, I was delighted though to see that, because and especially his description of that, I think it is powerful. Clothing, certainly. Plastics, and I'm sure we might have some little conversation given Ohio's recent derailment in terms of the fallout related to plastics. Poverty, another one that I wouldn't have necessarily thought of as an industry. And when he made the statement, human suffering is a profit-making enterprise, I almost want to put that on a banner somewhere, at least a bumper sticker. I mean, to me, that is just shockingly horrific. Then he talks about offsets to onsets. And again, I'm not sure that I would have thought about that as being an industry. So I wonder if this list is finite, or if other people would have added some other arenas to, that list of industries. So, we might want to just chat a little bit about that. In terms of how to move forward, I'm wondering if I don't know you all other than these meetings that, you know, we have had. It would be interesting to me if there are any of these areas that people have either particular expertise in that, you know, you might want to comment about those sections, or if there are any of those that you feel some confusion about and that you would like to ask questions about. I have to say, for me, and I know Chuck has had a lot of expertise around the banking industry, and that was an arena when he talked about, and I don't even know if the shortened version of financial technology, fintech is what he put in. That's an area that I feel like of all of the ones that are listed, that is the one that I'm pretty clueless about, except for what was written. And even then, you know, kind of so-so. In terms of plastics, I actually was just on a Sierra Club Zoom meeting right before this. There was a committee meeting on plastics. And if you all would like, you know, I can share a little bit of one of the initiatives that they've taken on, and maybe you all are even familiar with that. But I also wondered if anybody has any insights into what's going on around the derailment, and you know, just kind of some reflections on that. So, oh, and then one other thing that I would be interested to hear more from you all, in the politics one, he talks about ranked choice voting. And I just saw recently where there's some momentum to get that happening in Ohio. And if any of you had any insights about that. So I've kind of, you know, taken us a little bit maybe in a circle, and maybe I hope no one got dizzy. So why don't we start with, does anybody have any particular expertise in one of those industries that you might share some reflections on some of what he had to say under, you know, that subject heading, if you will?
So you don't have to raise your hand. You can if you want to raise your virtual hand, or you can just speak up, say, hey, I'll take that one.
Well, I'm going to put you on the spot, Chuck.
Well, no, let's forget.
Oh, someone was going to say something. Gina?
Gina.
Yeah,
You pronounce
I don't have a lot of expertise, but I am a Vietnam era veteran. And when I read the war industry section, it was almost appalling because why can't we look at peace as an option rather than building these stealth bombers that cost? It was just my was dropped because of the cost of these, nuclear bomb warships that are, in the ready. And I read it and I was disgusted that peace is not more important, and that, what's going on in Ukraine, continues to go on. And not that I have a lot of expertise, but it's really disgusting to read those statistics for me.
Yes. It's two things that are interesting is, he mentioned that there's no Department of Peace.
Right.
And one of my old coworkers, gosh, probably 20 years ago or 15 years ago, I don't remember how long, would go and advocate for a Department of Peace. I also saw, and again, it was 2 minutes before we were to have our Zoom call. And so I've only read the headlines, but Barbara Lee of California and Mark Pocan, P-O-C-A-N, of Wisconsin, had an initiative, now I don't remember how long ago, called People Over Pentagon Act. And so they're putting it forward again. And the proposal would be to cut $100 billion from our military budget. Woo! And put it towards education, healthcare, and the climate crisis. So I don't know if you all connect to this, I guess it's left-leaning. I hate to say left-leaning because to me, it's more like human beings speaking the truth, common dreams. Are you all familiar with that? So it's an article in their most recent email from Common Dreams that I'm eager to read about when we get off. I am astounded by the war in Ukraine. I have so many, what's the word I want to say? I don't believe what our government puts out enough, that to me, we never talk about the human tragedies that are going on in Russia. It's all Russia's so bad. But regardless of all of that, the war is horrific for people, plants, children, animals, blah, 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 blah. And how in the world, fortunately, I just heard the Pope came out saying we need peace negotiations. How in the world can we continue as a world spending this kind of money on militarized weaponry that could cause, beyond our biggest imagination, destruction, and is already causing sufficient harm, is more than a nightmare.
I certainly agree. It's a nightmare. And I like the fact that they started off talking about Eisenhower's warning about the military-industrial complex. And that certainly is an anchor to the theme of the of the war machine. I
was interested in that too, reading that.
Yeah, And so I'm old enough to remember when Eisenhower was president. But I also remember I was in DC in 1962 when they had the Cuban Missile Crisis. So I'm appalled at how little reference there is, given the fact that apparently Russia and us are working on these local small-scale nuclear weaponry. So that's a horrible thing. I wanted to say that Dennis Kucinich, and our Cleveland area, Ohio Buckeye, promoted the Department of Peace for years, and it, if you think about it, there's a lot that can be done, just by emphasizing diplomacy and the conflict resolution. There's been a lot of research on that, so we still need one. And okay, I'll let others comment.
The other comment that I had in my notes was 40% of government corruption is in the war industry.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. I was a government contractor for years in my in the area of education. I'm an educator. My brother worked for the Department of Defense out of DCSC here in Columbus, logistics place, and they're the people that catalog all the war industry material. Where is it and where is it located? But we used to talk about the if we got $1 million grant, it was just heaven, manna from heaven. And he would just be amused, because that's just, they had so much money that they were trying to give it away, as much as possible to the contractors. Just amazing the scale of what's going on with the Pentagon. So it's a real challenge.
Well, and it's all these, profit motives throughout all of these industries, the common piece. Moving into plastics, I thought it was interesting that he said that plastics is the second biggest threat. And so again, I would have never thought that. What, in terms of this Sierra Club and their plastics committee, anyone familiar with what they're doing and what has been going on? So they have targeted Kroger in the single-use plastics bags. And Kroger, of course, Kroger is the biggest food, I'm not going to use the right word, but that focuses on food versus your who's the big, where you could go and shop and get your clothes there and get your this there and get, so Kroger's is the biggest food focused source. And Kroger's is headquartered in Cincinnati. So they've evidently made some degree of advancement around not using single-use plastic bags with Kroger. And Kroger has these promises and commitments to get rid of single-use plastics by the year 2025. However, what they have done, I think it's in Virginia, is rather than having single-use plastic bags, they thickened the plastic bags so that now they can say they're no longer single-use, that you can use them more than once.
That's my response too.
Right? Even know if that's considered greenwashing. I just think that is manipulation with a big M and whatever. They also an initiative that Sarah Club hopes to move on is getting rid of the the plastic wrapped foods that Kroger produces. So let's stay tuned to see how they can manipulate that, as well as the notion of what is recyclable, what is compostable. You know, like we know that years ago, food started using the word natural for their ingredients. And it's been shown that natural means nothing, basically, you know, and my concern, because we don't have any standardized recycling systems, nor what is biodegradable, you know, all of those things have yet to really be, I think, legitimized and systematized. So it's still, to me, easy for these corporations to have a lot of wiggle room in their promises around getting rid of plastics. But anyway, so what do you all think about or know about with the East Palestine derailment? Anything in particular besides having nightmares at night?
JD Vance was there to check it out. I read that today, so that's good news, right? Just
And
kidding.
also Trump.
Oh yeah, that's right. Because we need his input too.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. You're on mute, Chuck.
Had to shut the door because there is background noise. I was asking Noah for his thoughts and to introduce his cat.
Oh.
Oh, yeah, this is Susie, just like a Susie Q, because she's black and white with the cream filling, I guess. I've kind of been avoiding the East Palestine news because I know there's a lot of misinformation out there, because when emotions are high, even for things that I agree with, somebody can post something where they exaggerate something and then I launch on it and I'm not helping. I did see with JD Vance and Trump there, and I just, okay, fine. I'm just kind of worried, and you do hear a lot about the microplastics that are in the oceans that can be led there even before a derailment, just any time of the year from our rivers and what gets into the ocean. So I do worry about that. And then just kind of to backtrack and not stay too long on it, I think it was interesting that Gina brought up the war industry, and that Betsy brought up one of the last headers was the poverty industry, and I never looked at that as an industry before. And so that kind of opened my eyes. And how to tie the two of them together is all the money that goes into the war industry. And we forget about poverty because there's not a profit there, apparently. And even today, I see a tweet from the Church of All People that they lost their funding for the warming centers. And what can we do about it? Is there anywhere I can protest or send emails to? And because these places get forgotten because there's not a profit motive there. So that's where my mind makes connections. And it was really hard for me to care about the Super Bowl and events like that when you see all that money being thrown around and it makes no difference as far as I'm concerned. You see people paying $7 million for a game worn jersey just so they can hang it up. And then I see tweets like what the Church for All People had to post today. And it really gets to my stress levels. And I've been fortunate I haven't had to go to the hospital yet, but it's things like that that I know it's going to do me in, because I can't make sense of these things. And that's me. I'm pretty privileged, and I can't imagine the people that are more directly involved in the outrage they feel. So yeah, the poverty industry, when he mentions that, really want to stress that. So thanks for bringing that up.
Thanks, Noah. I don't think I've met you before. Maybe you, how are you connected through Simply Living, or what?
Oh yeah, it was kind of events throughout the community, through like my humanist group. I hear Simply Living mentioned quite a bit, and then the vegan groups and groups like that. And I've been on the email list for a while now. And then the one Chuck sent out, and I saw this book, and then I went to the website and I was like, this is like the coolest website ever. Just the way that homepage is laid out. And then I saw you're already on chapter 10 or 11, but I think I'm gonna have to do what Chuck did and buy the ebook through Apple. I know it's Apple, but it is really convenient to be able to highlight things and then quickly go to them. And so I do like that option, but it's supporting Apple that I guess I have to bite the bullet. But I'm glad you're all doing this.
Well, thank you. And, you know, I personally, as I guess maybe this is a little bit of a personal get out of jail free card, but you know, we live in a complex society that is so interdependent that in some ways, how can we as conscious human beings not fall into some of the things that we know maybe aren't as beneficial as we wish they were? You know, that's, you know, so I got to tell you, I use Apple and use different things too. I mean, it's just like,
Yeah.
Unavoidable. I'm
it's
using.
unavoidable. Thank you. That's the word.
Yeah.
And I do want to mention real quick, I forgot that I wonder how much of the COVID funds that were meant for to help communities out ends up going to police or even something related to war. And here we are, the poor warming stations can't even be funded barely a year after the heart of COVID. And yeah, that's where my mind goes on things like this.
Our school qualified for some of that money. And I mean, it wasn't an astronomical amount, but it really, we were able to come up with some figures that were really kind of like, you know, not really financial things that we needed. I'm at a private school. So, you know, how many public schools were able to even put the information together and do all the documentation that was needed. We probably got like $40,000, but that's a lot of money for some people in some schools, right? I actually had to do some speed reading and I'm not finished with it, but that offsets to onsets chapter, I was just informed of something connected to this a couple weeks ago. I think the day after our last session, I was going to the landfill with my 4th and 5th graders. And while landfill, the educator shared that Sacramento, California offsets some of their carbon footprint by paying, giving money to the SWACO, the landfill, for the methane gas that goes to Columbia Gas. I totally had no idea things like that were going on. And it was the first time I'd really kind of understand it, but I don't really understand it. So does anyone have more like knowledge about that? Is this happening all over the place? This offsetting your carbon footprint by paying for, gas to go to a Central Ohio, yes, basically. The methane gas off the landfill is used at Columbia Gas for our utilities. And Sacramento is paying money for that to happen, and they get credit for it. So that's probably more simplistic than what is really happening. But I don't know, Chuck, do you know more? Can you explain that more in more detail?
Not very well. I know that, well, we used to have a trash burning power plant, which is turns out to be a nightmare wherever they do it, because there's so much, the stuff they're burning has so
Right.
much pollutants in that process. But there is a way, I guess, with anaerobic digesters to, efficiently get the methane gas out of the
Right.
landfills. And
Yep.
I think that's also used to power the CODA buses. Many of them, you'll see a thing saying powered with natural gas. So I think the offsets have been abused in many ways, and he sort of goes into that. But I think he's really trying to say, look, we need to push it forward. The onset idea being, something that's actually going to happen. So, for example, yeah, you may pay for the methane gas or so pay it forward idea
Right.
is more, you can track that, and you can be accountable in a way that you can't with tracking some of these offset proposals, and they're so diverse, et cetera. So it's just a way to kind of a corrective for the offsets.
Yeah.
I will say, because we talked about the train wreck. A lot of people aren't aware that the cracker plants, we had a big proposal for one right there in that area, and that's why the trains are going through in some respects. But the oil industry is now.
Cracker? Like you eat a cracker?
Oh, I'm sorry. No, it's the cracking of the ethane and methane or whatever to
Oh,
make plastics.
Fracking.
Crack. Well, they call them cracker plants, but it's based on the
I never
fracking
heard that.
gas. So they get the gas, the shale oil gas from fracking, and the oil industry now sees the future in plastics, because people don't realize that 98% of the plastics that are based on oil. So they create these giant plants to convert that gas, and you use it as the mechanism for creating various kinds of plastics. And I think that's horrible, and I'm sorry to see him doing that rather than solving the problems, which
Right.
he does talk in that area about ways we can solve the plastics and how to deal with single-use plastic. That maybe when you said that, I didn't know about the double-use plastics, but that's the kind of greenwashing they do. That's a great example. I hadn't heard of that before, but it's definitely a problem. And I know Lynn's over there thinking about stuff. What are you thinking, Lynn?
Well, I was, in terms of the plastics thing, I was interested to read about upcycling. We've always heard that plastic can't be upcycled, it's only downcycling. And so recycling of plastic is just not a very viable thing. You can turn some things into other things, but it only recycles about once or twice, and then it doesn't. So, but he brings up upcycling, which I had never heard of, and I didn't think was possible. So I guess I'm going to have to research that a little more to see if such a thing actually, it's probably possible, but not practical at this point. But and he brings up a lot of those things. He tries his best to put a positive spin on things and show that progress is occurring. But plastics is one of those things where just not much good you can say about what's going on other than the upcycling, because as he explains really well, it never breaks down. It just breaks into smaller and smaller pieces, and the smaller pieces aren't necessarily less dangerous than the bigger ones. So yeah, so I guess I was hoping to get inspired a little bit more by this book, but it hasn't really happened. He's made it clear that we can solve our problems, but it just seems to me that there's not very much chance that we are headed in that direction at this point. The progress that we're making, and he points it out quite well, I think, is just not enough. It's too small. We should be doing a whole lot, and what we're doing is a little bit. I like his idea that he brought about on the politics of voting, of ranked choice voting. I think that would go a long way to solve some of our extremist positions in the Congress and in the General Assemblies. It tends to bring politicians toward the center, which I think would be a very positive kind of thing at this point. But I can't imagine that it's going to happen. Apparently, there are a couple of states where it has happened. I think he mentions Maine and maybe one other one. So, but I can't imagine it actually happening in Ohio. It would be nice if it would. I guess it's possible. I was trying to think if it would even be a constitutional thing. It wouldn't be consistent with the United States Constitution, I don't think. But the states, under the federal constitution, the states can pretty much hold their elections the way they want to, and they can decide their candidates the way they want to. So it could be that we could end up with ranked choice voting in 50 states, which would essentially be the same thing as a national, a federal kind of thing. I just don't see that there's much political will for it.
Yeah, there is a group in Ohio that advocates for ranked choice voting, and you can learn about it at Carolyn Harding does the Grassroots Ohio it's on Facebook, but on that Facebook you can link to the podcast that are available, and there's a good one on ranked choice voting and what they're trying to do, and it probably will have to be because it's state level constitutional amendment, which is probably they're already worried about the fact that Ohio is one of the states that can can do initiatives and can change the Constitution on our own. They're already trying to push that back by requiring 60%.
Make it harder.
Yeah. But I think it's definitely an idea that I think all of these little ideas from the bottom up, it's going to take some big changes in order to move them up, to get them funded, et cetera. But I think have you heard of approval voting? It's simpler than ranked choice voting. I just heard about this the other day. Somebody called into Tom Hartman's program, I think, and was saying that you just vote by saying, you look at each candidate that's on the ballot and you can say approve or disapprove. And the one with the most approvals win. So that it's supposed to be simpler and easier to track, easier to educate people about how to fill it out. Doesn't require as much sophistication on the algorithms to get it right, because they've had some problems with some of those. Betsy mentioned I'm interested in finance, and I've been involved in the Public Banking Institute, another great effort that's not had a great amount of success, but they've done it for 102 years now in North Dakota. And so there's a lot of progress being made in a bunch of states to get public financing, which I think would be a terrific thing. But beyond that, and I think he points out that the banks are the ones who are funding the fossil fuel extractions. The biggest being Chase Bank, and periodically we go down and demonstrate it from the Chase building downtown Columbus, because 350.org and Bill McKibben have been pushing this for a long time. So I tend to frame things in terms of, and that's why I loved about the layout of the industries, because people don't realize that how many of these industries are international. It's globalization run wild. So, you go into McDonald's, it's a multinational corporation. They're everywhere. I remember I was in Indonesia for a month, and there's KFC right next to the hotel. So, go ahead. Somebody wanted to say something. Anyway.
30 years ago, I couldn't believe there was one there. Maybe 25 years.
Right. So I think we don't recognize the degree to which the interest of international global corporations have the impact they have on our politics system, on the or at least allowing the geopolitical. You can sort of make an argument that we have 800 military bases because we want to be the only country that can protect the free flow of oil or whatever else to sell our goods and services in every part of the world. So to me, I think that localization is the antidote to globalization. Doesn't mean everything has to be local, or we can't have the internet, or we can't have coffee and bananas, but make them fair trade. And as we localize energy, food, transit, that is itself a more sustainable thing. As we buy local, we rebuild our local economies that have lost ground. All our, what they call them, legacy cities in Ohio that have lost their plants or manufacturing base and lost their tax base, and et cetera. So the downtowns have disappeared as the Walmarts got built on the outskirts of the city. It's in every town you go to. That's the way, the same pattern. So to me, I'm optimistic in the sense that I think that it will take some really dramatic things, and maybe it won't. Maybe we'll have a nuclear war. Maybe we'll keep this fantasy that we can grow forever on a finite planet. But there are economic models in the wings. There are community solar and localized energy systems in the wings. There are all these ideas. I have great confidence in the I call them the nerd community. Maybe that's not the right word, but people who love to tinker and figure things out. And I think they've come up with all kinds of mushrooms eating plastic and converting them into something harmless. I don't know, the PFAs. So we have lots of things that have been changing from the bottom up. Local food being a great example, right? Local matters. We have OFA right here in Columbus, the organic food movement. So all the food trucks and the community supported agriculture, the farmers markets. But again, we are subsidizing the big guys that are using pesticides and ruining the soil, et cetera, which we've learned elsewhere, like you say, Betsy, in this book. But to me, the movement up will be in other words, we built an infrastructure for all the things that need to get done, but we're subsidizing the wrong things. So until there's like a Wall Street crash, I mean, Jay and Annie Warmke do this great podcast. If you don't listen to it, you should check it out sometime. It's called, I don't know, I can put it in the chat later, but they talk about all kinds of sustainability sorts of things. And one of the things they say all the time is, it's the end of the world as we know it. Thank God. You know, in other words, and Paul Hawken often says, he'll say things like, it's a great time to be alive. Why? Because we get to reinvent everything. All these systems, we've been reinventing them. So it's not like it's like a zero-sum game. We do it one way and then we can't turn a switch and make it the other way, but it's already evolving upward. We're building the infrastructure. So to me, a Wall Street crash, yeah, we can have local stock. That's another thing you can do locally, is you can do local stock exchange, you know. If you want to invest in cream of peanut butter, great. Jenny's, we have a lot of great things happening local, but so that's my take on the whole book, and especially this last chapter 9, because I really feel like he nails it, because each of these things, there are bottom-up things that you can do that it's a little discouraging to think they're not happening in these, you know, I know in terms of global economy, it takes over a huge percentage of like the retail market, the food market. I mean, how many local grocery stores are there now? Not many, because they've absorbed them all. How many community banks, and they're getting absorbed by the big banks. And so it's discouraging. At the same time, I think I just invite people to connect. Like, I think of Simply Living as an organization that's as somebody says, the carrier pigeon for the new culture, the new ecological culture, the new culture which is going to be the new common sense. You know, no, we shouldn't be poisoning our food. No, we shouldn't pretend that we can keep growing forever, and that you know. So and once we get enough people in Congress, it's only 536 members. Ralph Nader's always got some great ideas about how to turn over every congressional district and re-democratize the local. So anyway, I'll shut up, but I remain optimistic and invite people to just connect, like, you know, grow Simply Living, grow the community of people that are beginning to connect the dots. Everything's related. We can do this, but we need to take over, be the mainstream.
Why do you think, and again, I think I need to reread his definition of industry, maybe. Why isn't school system, education system, why isn't that listed as an industry?
I think
Don't you think it's an industry?
I certainly do. I'm a retired educator.
Well, that's why
No,
and
absolutely.
it's so fragmented and so profit driven.
Well, it's becoming that way, and the legislature in Ohio has been very aggressive about taking money out of the public schools and putting in the private schools. And there's no
Exactly.
evidence.
Horrible.
Go ahead.
It's horrible.
Yeah.
For example, we have students that come from failing Columbus public school districts, and they get money to go to this private school when their parents are millionaires. Their parents are millionaires.
Yeah.
That is ridiculous.
Yeah.
Absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah.
That's a really
Wrong.
good point, Betsy.
Something's wrong with that.
Yeah, it's and people don't realize that that's happening, Gina. They don't. It's all promoted on the idea that, the public schools are failing and we need to help these lower income folks get a voucher so they can afford to go to a private school.
Exactly.
But
Yes.
it's really a mess. And
And some do make that choice who are, living on the poverty line. But I'll tell you, I believe that there's a lot that don't, even at our little small school.
yeah,
That's
Well, and Chuck, you know this, I was in early childhood, the there is no system to
no,
early care and education and after
no.
school care, and so the pandemic has worsened the quality and availability of parents being able to access those kinds of services when there aren't people who are willing to work. Can you believe it? There aren't people who are willing to work at poverty wages. So don't get me started on that one. So I was surprised that education was not listed as one of the industries.
yeah, I agree. And I'm sure there are other industries that we could think of that, but the ones he covered were pretty amazing.
Oh, yes, yes.
And I think the poverty, I'd be interested in people's thoughts on the poverty thing. We've talked about that, how I think he does, I can't remember the exact phrase, but basically saying that if we took care of everybody in the community, living wages, healthcare, et cetera, that environmental justice is the same as, I don't know, poverty justice.
Yes,
The work
yes.
of William Barber III, he's such an advocate for, and it's just, you read this, like he makes all those comparisons in the war industry, talking about how the cost of an F-35 or whatever, F-15, what that would buy on to deal with the issues of equity. And so I was blown away by those examples. I think Gina mentioned that too. But I just feel like the environmental movement, fighting climate change, the whole theme of this book, fighting climate change is people, if you've got half the population that doesn't have a living wage, that doesn't, can't afford a ticket, speeding ticket or whatever, they don't have the space to join us in this effort to make these changes that need to be happening. So to me, I place a strong emphasis on that. And I've taught in low-income schools, quote unquote. And I feel like educators get the brunt of, well, if they just get to go to school and teachers would take responsibility and teach them so that they become literate by third grade and everything will be fine. No, it's not that simple. You got to deal with housing, you got to deal with healthcare, you got to deal with the environment that people are coming to school from. Wow.
Yep.
They cannot learn if their basic needs are not being met. It's just not going to happen.
Right.
And
Let me add one more industry that I think could have been in there, is the prison industry.
Mhm.
I don't know if you all saw, now I can't remember where I saw it, but there's a bill pending somewhere, I'm sorry, about prisoners selling their organs so that they can get reduced sentences. Have you heard of that, Chuck? Did you see that?
No, I haven't heard of that, but I do know the term prison industrial complex, which is we're the most incarcerated population on the planet. It's another good example.
Yeah.
And I think he extended the whole idea of industry precisely because really every, they just have this thing with Ticketmaster, right? Can't get the tickets to, and there's a little monopoly going on with selling tickets. I, I learned recently that there's a monopoly that manages the frames for glasses. That's why they're so expensive. And so monopoly power. I always, Bernie has a new book out, something like something about, it's okay to hate capitalism or something like that. But I say it's okay to hate monopoly capitalism. I'm in favor of local economic development. I've been studying that for the last 10 years, 12 years. And I'm all for entrepreneurs and the creative ways, new forms of businesses, B corporations and social enterprises, lots of energy going into doing things right. So anyway, there's a lot of industries out there where people develop a monopoly because they can. The big fish eat the little fish. That's why you need regulation, to let there be actual competition.
Well, as the facilitator, I noticed that we're at 5 after 8. So I want to respect that and respect that, Chuck, you continue to amaze me with moving through what I can't imagine with your eyesight as a disability that you have, and your optimism and your energy. It brings tears to my eyes. Thank you.
Well, thanks, Betsy. I do have some hope on the, I'm going to a retinologist, and I got my first eye injection. I get another one next week. So in theory, it has a drug in there that can stop or minimize. And my left eye has something on there that think another, I've had a couple of laser surgeries, but there's another one that could help that. So yeah, I do understand. I've been talking to a high school friend of mine who also has similar kinds of problems. He says, it is a disability. And, Sheila and I went out on a trip to Mount Vernon, whatever, and it's like, I'm so used to all my adaptations around here, but you realize somebody hands you sign the ticket for the visa thing. I can't read it, not without all my special adaptations. So yeah, it's visual handicapped. And years ago in the 70s, it's humorous. You got to have a sense of humor. I taught deaf-blind kids, the kids that were result of one of the first rubella epidemics that affected the eyes and ears of children. So I worked 3.5 years in that project at the University of New Mexico. And so I have a background in special education, and I've been involved with Council for Exceptional Children for many years. And anyway, so I'm getting to, and I had a really good friend, and I won't take up any more time, but Georgia Griffith, who's an amazing woman in Lancaster. She's deceased now, but I was kind of her personal assistant for a number of years and would take her on plane trips to conferences and things of that sort. She was just a brilliant person. She was born blind and went to school for the blind, had a degree from Capital University, taught music, and lost her hearing. And so she was an amazing person. And so I've had lots of connections with, and I also have my hearing aid. So I have almost deaf in one ear, but I can still hear pretty well. So maybe that's my destiny, but I'm lucky to be very healthy at whatever, 78, going on 79 this year. So I'm lucky to have energy, and so I try not to complain. Just adapt. Okay.
Okay.
We are at the end, so maybe get some last thoughts, and then we need a facilitator for the final one for 2 weeks from now.
Well, I'm not going to volunteer, but I just want to make sure, Chuck, that you send that podcast information because I would like to
Okay,
that. Okay.
I will do it.
And I echo what Betsy said about your brilliance regarding this topic. I've really enjoyed learning from you and being part of this because I'm fairly new to Simply Living, and it's a wonderful organization. I appreciate you and the organization.
And I continue to do the e-newsletter, but now we got Lynn on the board, doing great work. You want to have any last comments, Lynn?
Well, not really. I guess I'm right at a frustration point with with my work on the Simply Living board, but I guess that means we're about to make a breakthrough, I suppose. And
There you go. It's it's a challenge. We needn't go into that whole thing, but we appreciate that people like Lynn are stepping up to help with it, and we have some new energy. And he's trying to deal with our. I know from Sheila, my wife is on the board now, so I know you're dealing with the donor perfect membership, getting people to donate. How about that? Well, that's the last word on that. If you want to make a donation to Simply Living, just pop online and I will make the change on our my e-newsletter because I learned that I have one of the links doesn't work. I think somebody changed the donate link. It's still there. It's now on the homepage finally. So anyway, or the membership, not the donate. Anyway, appreciate everybody being here, and Betsy, thanks for honoring the time. And I don't know if Jane might want to do the last facilitation. It's a short piece. What do you think, Jane?
I'm going to decline because I don't feel qualified. Sorry.
Well, if worse comes to worse, Sheila or I can do it. Or we could put it on Noah, the new guy. What do you say, Noah?
Looks really important from the headers I'm looking at here. So it might have to go to the maestro.
Maestro.
Because that, at least that's the one that focuses on hope. So
Yeah,
hopefully.
Yeah, we all need hope. And I write about that on Medium. I'm almost finished with a follow-up to my main thing on the path to an ecological future for humanity. If you want to go to medium.com, Chuck Lynn, you can read what I think. Really?
Oh yeah.
It's very long. I always tell people if you could read the part one, it's 4 parts. You'll get the basic idea of it. Anyway, thank you for everybody for coming, and we'll end the recording. I can figure out where to do it again. Here it is. I think it is. Nope, wrong one. Still the wrong one. I'm so bad at this. Well, I may have to end it here. I'll end it and I'll do it after we finish this. But thanks to Betsy and everybody for coming. And we'll look forward in 2 weeks, and I'll be putting it on the update with the same link. We always use the same link, so easy to do. And thanks for the discussion. Lots of interesting stuff. Thanks to Paul Hawken. Take care.
Thank
Bye.
you all. Thank you. So good to be here.
Thank you. Somewhere I have a